1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Right, do you want to have that does testing?
We'll just do a quick check on YouTube now as well.
Yep.
We're getting all the way there. We've become paranoid. Yeah, exactly. Like, 15 seconds later, work well in our favour.
So tonight we'll be analysing all of England's football matches over the last 30 years.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you.
So hopefully this is a microphone that's working and some audio is coming through somewhere. So let's move it to.
So yeah, hopefully. It's a 15-second lag, we hope.
There we go.
Yes. Different delay.
So one day I'll turn up on there.
I can't remember what you said.
Okay.
Right, okay. Thank
Yep.
you.
I'll try not to get heat on your mic as well. Are you going to mute?
Hello, 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 everyone. There's some lovely seats over here, if you want to. We'll keep. Don't put me live yet. Don't put me online yet. Rube, what bum? I remember I did a student radio ad once, a student radio trailer for a show I did, and it just started off with the words "faceless techno bollocks." That was my slogan for my show, "Faceless techno bollocks." It outraged people in the student union, I'll tell you. 10 seconds. All right. Hello. Thank you for coming. I know it's a bit quieter than usual tonight. Apparently, there's some sporting event on which has distracted people. But I will nevertheless do the usual talk. You know, there's not going to be a fire. There is no fire drill scheduled. But what do you do if the fire alarm goes off? You leave. You exit the building. You can exit the building via the stairs. Don't use the lift. It's dodgy enough normally. It is working today, but if there's a fire, don't use the lift, allegedly. Please exit via the door you came in. If, for any reason, your exit is blocked down the main staircase and through the door, you can do boop, 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 boop. You can be Tom Cruise. Boop, 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 boop. You can go up to the 5th floor. Really. And you can go through... Oh, wait. Do a little dance. See, you've got to be careful. This is all part of the thing. You've got to be careful. Because you go upstairs, you climb through a window, you go across the roof, you wave at London, and then you come down somewhere in the building next door or something. Anyway, it's not going to happen because there's not going to be a fire. The fire alarm's not going to go off, and none of that's going to happen. But if it does, that's what you do. Right, are we ready now? We need to make up for the lack of numbers with lots of noise, if you can, please. We do a count in. Can you ask up in the gallery if they're ready? There was a young lady from Bude who went for a swim in the river. We're good to go, are we? Okay. What's the latency on this? All right. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to Cloud Native Media number 16. Oh, hey! Thank you very much. It's lovely to see you. What happened since we were last here? There was some sort of election. I think Macron lost. And some other guy lost, some Sunak guy as well. He lost apparently. So can't remember him. Yeah, blotted all of that out. Did everyone vote? Did everyone vote? Yeah. Okay. Good. Don't want to know who you voted for. It's all right. It's a secret. I'm not seeing anything on the stream, by the way. No. The wonders of doing live. You've got it over here. Yeah. Good. I'm just making sure it's on the actual internet. I can click F5 if you like. Is it? it's a fine head. Every time. Anyway, so what do we got coming up tonight? So we better get on with this because we got on a schedule tonight. We've got Noor and John from AWS. And we've got Matthew, who's going to do his major TV events thing, which is great because there's a major TV event tonight, which is very apt and appropriate. And afterwards, we'll be off to see the England game, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Yes, the 1 ton. We'll put the map up on the end. I don't know if there'll be room for the map up at the end, but we'll see. Who are we? We're an informal group. We don't have a membership scheme. We don't have a constitution. We're not a company. We're none of these things. We're just a bunch of people who turns up and enjoys the night out. So please, thank you for coming and supporting us and being part of this community. We have a code of conduct. It's very important. I will leave you a moment to read it. Thank you very much. What's cloud? Well, I like to call it computing infrastructure dynamically defined and controlled by software. Cloud isn't installing VMware on 20-year-old kit and saying we do cloud now. Yeah, not unless you've got some automation doing that for you. What's cloud native? It's doing stuff a bit differently because there's no point in doing it the same. Oh, whoops, stupid horse. And why are we here? We're here to collaborate. We're here because we can't all know everything. We are here because we're here to have some fun, really, aren't we? But we're here to share some knowledge as well. We want you to subscribe. Oh, yes. Yeah. That we did that. Yeah. That's it. It's good. It's good. It's good fun. Right. So that's us. We've got some sponsors. Is Dan here? No, Dan is not here. So Archiva. Well, this is our building. Archiva does archivery stuff, satellites, terrestrial, all of that stuff. TechX. Was Steve here somewhere from TechX? Yeah. Do you want to say something about TechX? TechX rules. Okay. David.
Seeing that we're on the clock, Cloud, speak to me.
Awesome. Easy peasy. Lightning talks. Yeah. Come on, do a talk. We've got some upcoming dates. cnm.live/dates. You know the drill. And I wanted to do a shout out. I haven't got a diary today because we're on a schedule, but I wanted to do a shout out for London DevOps' 10th birthday party. They've been doing this sort of thing for 10 years, which I can't imagine. I'm not sure I'll last that long, but hey, 24th of July, 6 p.m. News. We're going to have a short news section today, but everyone loves a bit news section. We've got to mention Tubi, which is the ad-funded VOD service from Rupert Murdoch, which has been, I think, on air in the US for a while, and they have launched it in the UK. What else have we got? We've got some AWS media updates. So we've got some folk from AWS tonight, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happened that they've launched in the last month or so. Media package cross-region failover. Source stream monitoring available for Media Connect, which is quite an interesting one. I think if you're using Media Connect, which a lot of broadcasters do, Media Tailor supporting the CMAF for ad insertion. That gets quite technical and complicated, but it is quite a useful feature. And some IVS streaming. IVS streaming is the sort of low-end streaming product that does up to, I think, 25,000 streams now. I think you can have you can do interactive streams, and you can record people who are involved in your interactive streaming thing. So hey, security news. We've got this CocoaPods thing, which is insanely technically complicated, but essentially it creates it's been open for 10 years, and it's a vulnerability that's probably active on most iOS and macOS devices. Bit of a disaster, and it's, as I say, it's complicated. It's about somebody forking a whole bunch of dependencies, and somebody, but it's complicated. We don't know if it's been exploited, but if it's been open for 10 years, it probably has. Cloud native use.
Just keeping it to one. Pretty bad vulnerability in SSH. It's a regression of a previous vulnerability that was patched in 2006, hence the tag they've given it, which is regression. Clever. Boo. Did you come up with that? No. Okay. Really, really quickly, though, it is something that everyone should be updating their SSH servers, or more importantly, reviewing embedded devices. Any embedded devices, hardware that has SSH, is probably more likely to be vulnerable than your servers, because this, at the moment, mainly, or does at the moment, impact 32-bit Linux servers. And a lot of embedded devices run a 32-bit chip or run some sort of 32-bit IoT device. The reason why it only affects 32-bit is because of the memory space. Long story short, too late. The way that the vulnerability works is someone absolutely hammers your SSH server with a lot of anonymous connections, and what they're trying to do is hit this very specific timing event, which allows them to trigger this vulnerability. But what they have to do is they have to set up the memory beforehand, and to set up the memory, they have to do, again, lots and lots of connections to do that. It takes time, and this is why it could take between 6 to 8 hours for someone to be able to do this. And on the 32-bit systems, you've got memory space like that. On the 64-bit systems, you've got memory space like that. So 64-bit machines are vulnerable, but the chances of someone of being able to actually exploit it is next to zero at the moment. But that could change. Someone could come along and refine the issue, and then it's a bad day. So long story short, too late. Update SSH. And only OpenSSH glibc-based versions, and so the OpenBSD team saying it's actually not a problem with OpenSSH per se, it's a problem with the Linux implementation of OpenSSH. So there you go. And showtime.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's mine. Yeah. Taking my beer away from me. How dare you? So, observability. What's observability? How do we do observability? How do we make sure our screams? How do we make sure our screams are heard? How do we make sure our streams are up and running and everything is working as we want it to be? Something that we have to do here, to make sure we're actually on the internet. Is it actually on the internet? Because this never really resolved.
And talking of screens and streams, this is going to be a little bit of an interesting demo. The demo gods have been against us today. So it's myself and Noor who's on the screen there. I think we're about to do this presentation completely the wrong way round, in that I'm going to present the slides that Noor's talking to, and she's going to present my demo remotely that I talk to. So bear with us and we see how this goes. Sorry. Yeah, is that better? Just the side. Is that better? There we go. So, Noor, do you want to kick off with the intros? And we'll hopefully you're seeing a slide coming through.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Hey, very nice to be here with this audience today. Thank you so much, Paul and team, for inviting us. This is such a cool space, actually, and I wish I could be in person, but hello from Toronto. So my name is Noor, and with me today we have John as well. We are from Amazon Web Services. I am a principal partner solutions architect with AWS, and in my role I support broadcast and sports partners. I've been with AWS for approximately 4.5 years. Before that I was with Evertz Microsystems, so if anyone comes from the broadcast space probably recognize Evertz, and so now I am fortunate to be working with multiple partners, which is really fun. And so I'll let John introduce himself first, and then we'll go into the context of what we're talking about today.
Okay, so I'm John Biltcliffe. I'm based here in London, so I don't get quite as an exotic location as Noor with Toronto. I'm an industry specialist solution architect, which really means that I come from the industry. I started life with the BBC 20-something years ago, been a long time at Red Bee, and now 3 years at AWS, doing various things, asset management, post-production, a little bit of play out in that time. I'm really here to just help customers in Europe sort of with their media workloads and say, how do you onboard to the cloud? The question I didn't ask, Paul, is how long have we got? What time are we running till? Okay, that's good. So, Noor, I'm looking.
Yep. I can see your screen, which is actually part of the demo, which is really fun. So what we wanted to do today is talk to you about observability in the cloud, but the larger context of that is essentially part of what we've done at NAB this year. If you were present and visited the AWS booth. And essentially kind of double clicking on the broadcast and the live production, we were showing a multitude of demos ranging from the newsroom activation at NAB, where we actually delivered live news with the NAB as part of the NAB show live. Another part was the live cloud production and also another demo for the newsroom. So the live cloud production focused on sports content, essentially talking about live production in the cloud. And then the third part, which is what we're double clicking here on, is the operational side of things and looking at playout, distribution, and also obviously contribution with a lens of observability. And what we really wanted to focus on, and we will actually continue to focus on that as well for IBC, if you do plan on joining, is that, how do we provide kind of single pane of glass observability for operators? So we understand that the technology works. We heavily rely on our partners for their superpowers and their solutions relative to the various, let's say, broadcast bits and pieces. But really thinking from an operational standpoint, how do we make sure that it is a streamlined experience where an operator is not necessarily hopping from one tool to another to be able to have a look and an understanding of what's going on in their system, right? So that is a key messaging, and that's what John and I are here to talk to you about and show you what we built for it, and then go from there. John, next. Okay, so before I share my screen and essentially have John walk you through the demo, essentially this is what we were showing at NAB, and this is what we will show you today to some extent. Essentially, this constitutes of an end-to-end broadcast workflow ranging from contribution of feeds. At the time, we had live feeds coming in as well as feeds coming in from other pods into the left-hand side of the screen that you see here, and then essentially doing monitoring. So I think Paul was talking about Media Connect, Elemental Media Connect supporting monitoring. So that's actually part of what we're doing here. And then going into the master control room, we're doing playouts. We are actually showcasing routing in the cloud and normalization, and I'm happy to down click on that as well. And then the distribution side for NAB in North America, we were showing ATSC 3.0. So we're not showing that part here today because it requires multiple things, inclusive of an actual on-premises, for example, a demodulator and set-top box. So, but then the idea is that we can support much of that workflow in the cloud, and you just need the demodulation aspect on premises. The other thing that we're showing here is the power of a hybrid workflow, right? So a lot of components will remain on premises. So things like, for example, leader monitors or probes, if you're familiar with leader. Yep. So that was actually, we were showcasing that in a couple of ways. One is the on-premises probe that John was pointing at, and then also the web version or the software version of it. Yeah, thank you, John. By the way, the latency is working very well. So, and then the other monitor is a Sony, like a Sony professional monitor on the left-hand side or left of the leader. right? So these components are not there, but hopefully you get the idea. And essentially what we're saying is that we can work with our customers depending on the requirements and the facility setup that they have, so that you can provide the familiarity for operators in terms of looking at the workflow. In our demo, the way that you'll see, and I'll share my screen in a second, is that these three monitors or three sections of the demo, you'll see them as kind of separate windows, just because we don't have that large screen. And we'll show you the interfaces, and then we can show you the routing interface, the normalization interface, and then it's important to know that a lot of what we're doing is API based, right? That's really the beauty of it, which means that how we control these things can be customized, obviously, depending on some operators like a tactile interface. So in the demo that you see for NAB, we used a Stream Deck. So it was actually my Stream Deck in this case, where we programmed some APIs so that we can do some routing and switching. Just to give you an example of kind of the variety of it. The key thing here is that with observability, as workflows become more intricate and more pieces are being added to it, we cannot stress enough how important it is, right? So you want to monitor at every layer. And so, monitoring at the infrastructure layer, if you think of it as a cake, right? The infrastructure meaning your compute, your, let's say, encoding engines, your playout engines, whatever it may be. We're then monitoring at the application layer, so using partners like Tag, right, who are doing the multi-viewer part, and which is much of the videos that you will see here, right? Being able to build dashboards, so everything that you're seeing is actually built into Grafana, so that we're facilitating a tool like Grafana to actually do the entire dashboarding, right? And then, of course, with every tool, so Leader was another example. And then with every tool comes a set of, let's say, alarming. And then you can essentially build any sort of logic around it to make use of the data that you're ingesting or that information, right? So for example, we have some back-end systems that are using Kafka messaging from Tag multi-viewers so that we can trigger, failover, just to give you an example, right? And so with that, John, what I'll do is, do you want me to share screen?
Yeah. Oh, I seem to have dropped off the call, so can somebody readmit me, please? Reason being, then you can actually hopefully see it on here as well. There we go.
Okay, is it coming through?
It's coming, I think. There we go. Yeah. So as I said, the demo gods were against me. I could get the dashboards, but trying to get the video working in here over a mobile connection or on the Wi-Fi just was against me. So it worked beautifully last night at home when I was testing, but as all good demos do. What I would say is, if you do get the opportunity to come and see these at the trade shows, it's well worth actually seeing these up on the big screen where you've got all of them there. I know I walked onto the stand having not seen them at NAB, and it is a wow moment. Because yes, I've seen multi-viewers over the years, but this really brings together a lot of that observability and control actually into one place. So you've got kind of one pane of glass bringing everything together. So as Noor said, we've got WebRTC streams coming out of Tag. So you can use Tag as its own multi-viewer. It's completely on its own, doing everything in terms of video, audio that you would usually use in a multi-viewer. But in this case, we've been able to bring not only the video from Tag together, but all the other data. So we brought out some of the video data that Tag is doing. So it's running the probes on the video for us. And we're able to, again, over the APIs to pull that in. We've got the failover here, the main and backup Media Connect feeds coming in. And again, we've brought data together here in the dashboard, but we can actually also fail those over. Because it's Grafana, we can embed buttons in there and anything we want, basically, and lay this out how we like. So we end up with the buttons there to do things like the source failover on the Media Connect between the main and backup. And actually, we can see the status even before we go. There's a kind of video that some people might recognize in the bottom left here, we're only getting one side of that signal for speed and getting that up and running, but you can see its pair isn't there, so there's no point in trying to do a source failover on that one because you can immediately see on the dashboard it's red. There's probably something up with it. Go and investigate before you fail over. So by bringing all these data sets together, you start getting some really interesting sort of visualizations of what's going on in your chain. When we were showing this at NAB, we were bringing in feeds from all our different playout partners. Today we're just running some loops, so we actually get some moving pictures in there. But at the end of the day, it is all coming in through Media Connect. As Noor said, we're then taking it into a TVU sort of routing layer with their media hub. So we get the route buttons on here, and we get the sort of XY kind of view of what's going on in the router there. So again, you can see what's happening routing-wise. We're also bringing up the latest alarms from the tag multi-viewer into it. So in one view, you can kind of stand back and say, are my pictures working? Have I got moving video? What's my status of my failovers coming in on there? I can dive into the deeper technical detail of the different streams. I can see what's going on. And it just brings that kind of contribution world together in terms of here's all my sources and what's the status of them. Noor, what have I missed? Or do you want to go into routing?
You haven't missed anything.
That's always good.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that your point regarding failover. So while John was talking, I actually went into and I did a source failover on the Media Connect. So like right now it's running from the primary, and previously this box was orange, right? Just to kind of showcase that. Again, what we're doing here is we're tapping into the API of Elemental Media Connect so that we can fail over when we have a problem. And essentially what you're seeing here in terms of like PID information or stream information is actually generated from Elemental Media Connect. The sources that we have in this case are not identical. So when we do source switching, in this particular example, it wouldn't be 22.7, but that's because the sources are not identical. But if they were, then you're able to do 22.7 hitless on the input side of Elemental Media Connect.
This is where you realise that one of our broadcast solution architects works in Spain, hence the Spanish content in there. When we moved off from the feeds that we had at NAB, he obviously went to something he liked and knew. There's a question in the room about what are the green squares on the matrix on the right here. This is basically a kind of view XY of your source, your destinations and your sources. And so it's just a kind of pin matrix style where a green box is. So a TEM3 has what is labelled as AMP1A feed going to it. If you were to then do the routing, change the routing in the underlying TVU network's routing layer, this will update and the green boxes will move around as those routes are changed on there. So it's a simple view of what's routed to where at what times. And it's the kind of thing that actually in a real environment you probably nicely set up so you know what the pattern is and you can immediately see. But you could also color code. This is the beauty of Grafana, it's configurable. You can change it. If you don't like that, it's a dashboard that you can go and change and reconfigure. You could do different color coding, maybe red and green or whatever it is for different sources, main and backup, or if you're doing router switch style switching. So the whole point is it's configurable to be what you want it to be. That's just the view that we created as a nice kind of snapshot of visualization of what's going on in the video kind of routing layer. Because on an IP video, it's become very ethereal, so that just gives you a bit more flavor of what's actually going on there.
Yep. Absolutely. It's worth mentioning as well, just going back into the sources. So the way we are bringing sources in, or at least what we did for NAB, I mean, these are looping clips, but for NAB, we were actually working with some of our playout partners. So inclusive of, Harmonic, Amagi, GVAMP, and Imagine Communications, to name a few. Right, so the idea is that they actually set up the playout in their accounts, so that was running in their environment, and they essentially sent us SRT feeds into the system. So they were contributing into the system, and then we pick up the SRT feeds through Elemental Media Connect, so that we can have that observability component from Elemental Media Connect. And we also had some live feeds from live view, right? So the idea is to simulate what potentially a real life scenario looks like. So, live view could represent operators or reporters on the ground covering a specific event, right? So if you probably know this, so live view would have their backpacks, for example, or their encoders. Same thing with our partner TVU networks, similar concept. You can have roving reporters who are sending their feeds essentially into the as part of the contribution. And then finally, you're seeing this pip with the live feed from the room here. That was part of the, let's say, the live news feed that we did at NAB. So essentially plugging in any live feed there as well.
And again, all we're doing is SRT from here to the Media Connect. So that was all that actually needed to be changed in this setup. All the rest of the dashboards, because it was already a flow, it was already set there with the monitoring. All the dashboards were set up. All we did was connect the SRT in. So there was a question.
Oh, just between your load and your backups, is there any latency? Is it instant or is there?
It'll depend on what your sources are. If you've got a 2022-7 seamless failover, then it should be. But obviously, if you've got non-synchronous sources, there's a limit to what we can do in that world. So Noor was saying on that one up the top there, it isn't synchronous, so you will get a tear sort of break in the video as it switches over. So it really is down to what are you giving as to whether that capability is there. But in that case, that's Elemental Media Connect. You could do switching many other ways if you needed to, but that's the one that we've kind of built in here.
So yeah, Elemental Media Connect does support hitlist 22-7.
Yep.
And so then for that to be active, your sources need to be identical and just kind of going through the diverse paths.
If they're two syncs, if they're two chains that are absolutely in sync, 2022-7 coming in, then it should be absolutely seamless. But yeah, the moment you step out of that, there's a limit to what we can correct back if you're giving us non-synchronous sources. So yeah. Noor, did you want to do the routing kind of layer?
Sure. So we'll take a little detour from this kind of a 3 monitor just to show you kind of hopping into the router part. And essentially what we use for this is, are you familiar with TVU networks? Can I see show of hands if you know TVU? Okay.
It's about 5 or 6 for you.
Yep. Okay, that's good. So again, we rely very heavily on our partners, and I mean, part of why I absolutely love this job is because each partner comes in with a full set of superpowers. TVU Networks is a solution provider for broadcast and live production, right? So they have a suite of products. What we specifically used as part of this demo is a product called Media Hub. So think of it as a routing and a normalization platform, right? So the way the workflow, if you were to imagine it works, is that we have feeds coming in, we put them through Elemental Media Connect so that we can look at source observability and metrics. And then all the channels are routed through Media Hub. So what you see here is the web GUI of Media Hub. What I like about it is that it's very operator friendly. So I can see my sources, I can see the outputs, and essentially I can route a source to a destination by pretty much, dragging and dropping. I can drag and drop like a source and I can put it out on a destination. The nice concept with Media Hub is that the output side, what they've done with it is that they defined it as a project style. Right, which means that when I'm defining an output is a project. So for example, I can go in and I can define a multitude of outputs that are part of this specific project. So let me try to find one that is actually doing that. But the idea is that I can take in an input and I can fan it out to multiple outputs. So for example, right now for the cloud native media, so as you can see, I have my input feed coming in from the camera, and then I'm actually routing that as an SRT output so that somebody can pick it up using like a VLC or any receiver endpoint. but I can in fact add a multitude of outputs. So let's say if you want to push this to YouTube, or I need to push it to some affiliates, for example, for distribution, then I can actually add another destination that has a completely different set of specs that you configure. And then once I get that configured, whether it's an NDI output or a ZXC or a UDP, then essentially I can, whatever I route into it is going to be able to find out. So the nice part is that I can do a bunch of transcoding or signal processing as I route or fan out into multiple distribution outputs. And worth mentioning that part of that processing can include frame rate conversion. The reason I bring that up is because we generally get asked a lot, that's something that our partners do, for example, and so the idea is to say like, yeah, that is something that is available. So when I create essentially a destination, I can essentially define the type of, let's say, frame rate that I need on the output. I can define the bit rate of the video, the codec, so on and so forth. And then if I'm not doing any transcoding, if it's a simple pass-through, then it acts as a true router and it just passes through the signal. And the reason why this becomes really important is because from a router standpoint, you want to maintain, let's say, the integrity of whatever the source is. And so by enabling pass-through, then we're able to truly route.
So I think the key here is that if you're an MCR operator, you've got that flexibility, because in the traditional world, MCRs are obviously dealing with an awful lot of video routing, but they need all those other tools, the audio normalization, the standards conversion, the format conversion. And in the IP world, with such a plethora of standards and things going on, then having these sort of tools available in there, and the two tie together. The dashboards that we saw there, the API calls from the routing buttons are driving the TVU media hub interface here underneath, or you can do this directly. So for an MCR, you've not just got your observability, but you've actually got your tools to be able to go and work. And the pass-through, as Noor was saying, if you've got your sort of scopes, the leader that we talked about earlier, then you can get that feed straight into it and get that true observability that an MCR wants to know what is actually up with this feed, what's really going on with it, rather than having had it sort of processed by three things before it gets to there, at which point it's kind of irrelevant. So the two kind of really go hand in hand, providing you with observability and the tools to actually go and do your job in terms of sort of routing and distributing the video around. So I think the next dashboard, I think, if we, because I'm conscious of time and football, the second dashboard that we saw in the middle of the picture at 10AB is really about playout. So we talked a little bit about sort of contribution and MCR. The next stage is kind of your linear playout, and again, built on the Grafana world here, this is a view, kind of conceptual view of what you might want to say. What's the health of an individual channel that's going on? So Noor said earlier we're using Vipe from BC Next. And again, we've been able to embed their UI because it's an HTML page, web page. We've been able to embed that straight into the Grafana dashboard. So actually, you could give that to somebody, and you've got all the controls. You can interact with the channels directly there, or you can treat this like a heads-up display, where you want it on a screen on a dashboard, and where are we in the running order. And certainly in my previous life, we ended up with physical machines running playout automation clients with a SCI converter on the back of it to feed into the multi-viewer world to be able to do this sort of view. And you just go, it's just a web page, embed it now. So the kind of ability to, because of APIs and everything's now web-based, to mix and match this becomes so much greater than it used to be. And again, we've got things like the controlled of the TVU media hub. We've got the information coming out of Tag Multiviewer, but now we're actually starting to also pull in some of the CloudWatch metrics. So I've got my A and my B playout engines going on, so I can see them independently. Are they both running? But I've got my health of what's going on with them. And actually what I really like in the Grafana is you can get these little graphs of history of what's going on. So not only is everything green, but actually, you know what, they're pretty stable, working at a steady level. That's a good thing to see. If I'm just going to start seeing things going really all over the place, particularly on things like video bitrate, if that suddenly drops out or goes big, you know you've got problems. So again, bringing this together, you end up with that kind of view. Playout engines, in the case of BC Next, they do a lot of pre-rendering in order to make the playout as simple and lightweight and low cost as possible. So actually, you can also see the render engine going on there. But we do have also a live feed, so we can see the live feed coming in, but we can select what that is in the middle here, drop down of all the available sources to say, what do I want my live feed? So in theory, you could have a playout operator say, actually, you don't need anything other than this. You've got your UI, you've got your monitoring, you've got some visibility of what's going on. Or, as I said, you can put this on a big screen to say, as a visibility sort of dashboard in here. But it's really, again, all about that bringing together the different data sources from the different pieces, the different places, and configuring it in a way that the users will actually find it most interesting and most useful to go and do your job. So secondary events would be as part of the Vipe user interface. So this is the Vipe UI. You can run this in its own window entirely and drill into all the kind of usual playout capabilities for a playlist in there. It does have its own previews as well within that interface. Yeah. So in this case, we've kind of shrunk it and put it there, but it's a fully featured UI in its own right. So you could run it in this window, nor could click through the different items on the schedules. You could do take next, all the usual things you do on playout within dashboard, or as I said, you can run it as its own sort of web page in a separate window on a separate device, whatever you wanted to do. But yeah, it's a fully featured playout sort of system.
John,
in that sort of way.
do you see my other screen now, or
I'm still seeing the dashboard, the playout dashboard.
so the separate window, or as part of the Grafana?
No, we're still seeing the full Grafana.
Okay, let me try something. I just wanna just to the point that you're talking about. Hang on, let me.
So I think we're probably going to get the Vipe interface. I'd guess.
Yes, good guess. Let's see.
And that's the thing with
Can you
all of
see it
these
now?
things. You can choose. They're just web interfaces. So yeah, here we go, full screen. You can see all the status of the events, what's going on, and drill into those in more detail.
Yep. So that's our backup. Essentially, what we've been doing is importing playlists if we want to. So I will not actually do that, but I can prepare a playlist that has been already kind of pre-created. So we have like a bunch of options in here, and so we're playing one of them and kind of looping some of the content with what we've done here. Or as part of the NAB demo is kind of showcase a pop-up channel or simulate the creation of a pop-up channel. And so the team created some back-end, serverless architecture that would essentially trigger Vipe to create that pop-up channel infrastructure and then spin it down when it's done, as well as obviously bring in the live. So essentially, just to John's point, this is a live view of the Vipe playout, and it is identical to what you're seeing in the actual Grafana dashboard.
And I think as part of the spinning up, part of that also was the observability to go with it. So it's great that you can pop up and pop down these things, or events, channels, things like that. But actually, it's really key that you make sure the observability can follow along with that. So you want to make sure that you're picking up the events in the Media Connect or feeding into the tag and bringing all of that together for those as well. So it's very easy to say, the static 24/7 channels and things like that is actually almost easier. Is the easy piece to do these days. It's those pop-up event channels that one day I've got none, and the next day I've got an election with hundreds of streams going on. You kind of get that. You've got to make sure you've got everything scalable in that kind of capability. I'm very conscious.
Totally.
Very conscious of time. There's a third dashboard just to touch on very briefly, but I think I don't think we've got a lot of time to spend on it. And the third one, Noor, can we grab the distribution dashboard?
I thought you were seeing it.
No, we're still seeing Vipe. So the third one was really about distribution. So we've got the content in, we've normalized it, sorted out MCR, we've played it out, and now we need to distribute it. And particularly in the traditional broadcast distribution, there's a lot of focus on OTT and streaming, that sort of side of things, but there is still the need to distribute content in the traditional sort of space. And as Noor said at the beginning, this was US based, so it was ATSC 3.0 based. Our plan for IBC is that there will be an equivalent demo based around DVB, which is much more applicable in Europe. But again, we've been able to do things that are useful, like maps of the network links and color code those so you can see the link from Oregon, where this is all hosted, to Los Angeles has gone red. Noor can actually simulate for me sort of fixes and failures on the links, which is just going to manipulating the underlying network and feeds, but it therefore kind of just gives the idea that you can actually view it a very quick view of what's going on within your distribution network. And again, we can do the thumbnails of what's going on. This is now a term encoding and pulling all the data out of that. So actually, as long as the system has an underlying API, which pretty much everything does these days, you can then start pulling that up into the dashboards. I'm going to pause there.
John?
Yep, no.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that this is not just for ATSC 3.0, right?
Yeah.
So think of a workflow where you have a hub and spoke, or where you have MPPDs or affiliate locations, and you're sending them streams. And essentially, in this single pane of glass, you want to see a holistic view of the health of these kind of endpoints and the connections between them, and that's what we're simulating. So I did simulate the failure to John's ask, and you can start to see it also pop up in the timeline here, and it's kind of telling us like, hey, the connectivity to Denver, which is the endpoint that we're monitoring, is not really healthy. So the type of distribution almost doesn't matter in that case. What really matters here is how we're pulling in all these various metrics. So we're using, let's say, the encoder from ETAM and the StatMux to pull in the stats of that kind of side of things before we transmit over ATSC 3.0 as a second example.
We probably need to wrap because I'm conscious we've got Matthew and then the football, but just one last thing to say, and that is all our demos from NAB were we've made a whole sort of micro website with videos of every single demo pretty much that we did out there, architecture diagrams and information. So if you do go to the QR code there, you'll take you to the NAB 24 site with all the information, so you can dive into more details on any of those. If not, and if you've got any more questions, grab me afterwards, or feel free to sort of reach out, and Noor or I can pick those up at a later date. But I'm very conscious that we probably had our half hour, and we do hand on to Matthew. So I just want to say thank you very much. I've seen quite a lot of nods and sort of interest. So yeah, if you've got any questions, grab us afterwards.
Well, I think we've probably got time for one question, if somebody has one.
Must be one.
No? David? David's always got a question. You're going to contain yourself. Go on.
Okay.
Right. Fair. Thank you very much,
In which case,
guys.
thank you. I hope it's been interesting.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Right. Am I still here? Are we? So, how are we feeling? Do we want a 5-minute break? Grab a beer, grab another slice of pizza. Yeah, do the thing, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So we need to be back 25 past. 25 past, because we don't want to finish late tonight. We know there's important things happening. It's all good.
Yes, I can.
You can hear us now.
microphone
Okay.
Is a bit more, one is a bit more muffled than the other, but I can hear.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. We're having a little break. You're welcome to stay and listen into the other talk, but thank you very much for joining in, and it's been a great session.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Our
you.
First international.
Hey.
Yes, you're international. Great job. Bye, guys.
Hello, hello. Oh, hello. All right. Are we back on the internet? All right. Which camera's live? Which on here? Hello, welcome back. Before we move on, don't forget to subscribe and to hit the like button, because it helps us make quite seriously. It helps us make these events. It helps make these events happen if you can all click like and the subscribe button. And obviously, if there are things that you've heard about that you want to comment on, that you want to discuss, there is a comment section. So please go and make use of that. So we have Matthew here tonight. After we finished here tonight, there is a major live TV event, certainly for the UK, to some extent for all of Europe, and this is the Euro 2024 semi-final between England and the Netherlands. But Matthew is here to talk about major live TV events. Are they a thing of the past? Are they something that happened in the past and maybe are less important today? Obviously tonight maybe is an exception, but we're going to hear all about that. So over to Matthew.
Okay. That sounded all right, and the mic's in the right place. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to just introduce myself a little bit for those who don't know me. And the last time I made it to one of these events, because unfortunately I was meant to do this back in April, but had to cancel at short notice, was actually the event where the Museum of the Mobile Phone presented. So I thought a really good way of introducing myself is to say that my very first mobile phone was a Nokia 2210, which I got back in 1996, just before I got married. So there we are. It was very useful in doing those last-minute organisations. And then a bit about my past. We're here in Newman Street. And I've spent quite a lot of the last 10 years of my life in Newman Street. 10 years ago, I was back in 2013, I was working at FreeSat as CTO over there. And then 5 years ago, I crossed over the street and came here to Arqiva, where I was until last year, where I ended up as Director of Product. And I'm now a consultant in product and technology strategy, with a particular interest in how television is going to transition to all IP. And with that work, I was writing a blog post back in March, really looking at the need for multicast IP and things like Maud in order to support that transition to all IP. And in that, I was sort of thinking about what is the impact of major events, because when you talk to people about IP, they go, well, we've done that, we know how to do that, been doing that for decades, but we're really worried about the Queen's funeral. How on earth would we support and manage that? And so I was thinking, well, where does the Queen's funeral sit in all of this? What has happened over the last? Well, I found out I could get 60 years worth of data. So what's happened over the last 60 years? And I came up with some interesting facts. So I thought it would be interesting to present some of those more as a kind of light relief for this event. So hopefully it will be interesting and will be light relief. It will be more interesting if there's a bit of audience participation in this. So I'm going to ask some questions. I'm keen to hear feedback. So I want you all to imagine that you're not in the audience of QI, but you're on the panel of QI. So I was going to say, do people know what QI is here? Is anyone who doesn't know QI? Think of me as a svelte Sandy Toksvig, and we'll all do quite well. At all. So, going to start off with a question is, what was the biggest television event last year in 2023? Coronation. Coronation of who? King? Well, those who haven't watched QI will have no idea what was going on there, but Basically, that means that it was the wrong answer, because in fact it was the coronation of King Charles the Third and Queen Camilla, and people often miss out the Queen Camilla. And as you see, I'm going to be an absolute pedant tonight, and want exactly the right information. So if you're interested, there was an average of 18.8 million people who watched that event. It was 20.4 million at peak, and those numbers were made up across 11 different services in the UK. UK audiences. And all my numbers, everything is about the UK. It's about the UK market. So I apologise to the international listeners. We'll try and make it as relevant as possible. So that was that. Though most of that viewing was on the BBC. So I think 13 million of that 18 million was on BBC One, or at least on the BBC channels. So my next question, I've been looking at this research over the last 60 years. What do we think is the largest television event in the UK over the last 60 years? No? No. Well, you were meant to have said, because it's the answer that I normally get, it's the moon landing. But it's not the moon landing. Oddly enough, no one actually shouted out the right answer, which is a bit unusual. This was 1966. And of course, the World Cup final, England versus Germany.
I think all the football fans aren't here.
Yeah. All the football fans are gone. Which...
I was going to say the 2018 semi-final between England and Croatia.
That may indeed come up later. So that has been our biggest event. And so here is a chart of all of the top event each year for the last 60 years. And what we can see back here in 1966 is the highest one, which was the World Cup final. And I can't remember any of the numbers, so we'll just give me a moment here. So that was 32.3 million viewers on the 30th of July, 1966. So this is the chart that I created in that research, and what I then sort of got interested in is what are these different peaks and troughs that we see across the last 60 years. So next up, so that was our 1966 peak. So next up here is 1969. And what was the largest television event in 1969? Moon landing. God, I got people playing the game properly now. Unbelievably, it was not the moon landing. Would anyone like to hazard a guess of what it actually was? If you do know, well, yeah, no, it could have been. That could have been how I played the game. No, no. The biggest event, television event of the year was something called The Royal Family, which was a documentary about the royal family. And if anyone watched The Crown, it was featured. The filming of it was featured in The Crown. It was featured. By the way, people who are listening in, there's cheering coming in through the windows. I don't think it's for me. So it was a documentary. It's made about the royal family. Most watched program that year in the UK. The royal family absolutely hated it and buried it for many, many years, and is only recently, in the age of the internet, re-emerged on YouTube. So this was watched by 38 million viewers in the United Kingdom, and was watched by an estimated 350 million people around the world. Now, one of the things to say about the moon landing is I thought maybe moon landing hadn't featured because it was on at a bad time of the day, but actually the sort of magic all happened at 10 o'clock in the evening, so 2000 hours GMT, GMT, which means it happened at 9 o'clock in the evening, which is absolutely prime time. So I'm really sorry. Now, the actual man walking on the moon, that was happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, so I can understand that wouldn't have had many viewers. But the actual moon landing, those 13 minutes, I was surprised hadn't made it. Right, going back to my chart. So we've done 1969 there. So jumping forward to 1986. 1986. What kind of year was 1986? There was something going on in 1986 that was happening quite often every 4 years. World Cup, but no, it wasn't the World Cup. So 1986 was World Cup year. It is, of course, famous for the England versus Argentina match, which Argentina won 2-1 with the hand of God goal scoring moment. Now, what I was interested to find out, in a little bit of research, was that in that match in 1986, that was the first time Argentina and England had played each other since the 1966 World Cup. And actually, the Argentinians had always claimed that they had lost that match due to an offside goal, can't remember who scored it, offside goal that was allowed by a German referee. And they had held a grudge against England since that date. So us Brits had no idea. We created the Argentinian grudge, obviously, as a small matter of a war between the two countries, but it was what they were really upset about was the 1966 World Cup. So you, of course, are all wanting to know what was the largest event in 1986. It was EastEnders, which is a soap on BBC television, and Den had served Angie with divorce papers on Christmas Day, December the 25th, and that became the largest event of 1986. So that was 1986. What happened in 1987? No, it was the aftermath. So a few days later, no, actually, 6 days later, on the 1st of January 1986, we had the follow-up of the divorce, and that became the largest event in the UK that year. 87. Thank you. Right. So moving on from that, we can jump to 1997, and yes, this one is easy to get. It was the funeral of, be really pedantic, Princess Diana, Princess of Wales. Anyway, I can't actually remember what titles she managed to retain at that stage. I missed that. I wasn't one of the many millions who watched that. I was at a wedding on that day. Obviously, it was a bit of an odd wedding, but there we are. So that's obviously a big standout event. And then the next kind of big one here we've got in 2011. It was sort of 2011. Guesses there. So in 2011, of course, it was the wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton. So that's 2011. Now, so 2012, what part of the Olympics? Opening ceremony. Thank you. So it wasn't, in fact, the opening ceremony. Now, I don't know if you can remember, actually, in 2012, up until the opening ceremony, everyone in the UK was saying that the Olympics was going to be a complete failure, the traffic was going to be a nightmare, and until that day, it had actually been raining for almost all of June and July, which we may be actually quite familiar with this year. Miraculously, traffic wasn't a problem. We showed the world what a great opening ceremony we had, and it actually stopped raining for exactly 2 weeks to last us through the Olympics. It then started raining almost immediately afterwards. And so it was the closing ceremony that was the largest event of the year, not the opening ceremony. So the closing ceremony got 24.46 million viewers. So we have a go. Now we've got a big bump at the end here. So what do we think the big bump at the end is? I'm cheating a bit by not telling the year. What do you think's good? Queen's funeral. Thank you. So it wasn't actually Queen's funeral, and as you will have seen from those last years, we had a bumper 3 years. On the 10th of May 2020, we had 18.99 million people watching the Prime Minister's COVID statement. Then the following year, which was the big peak that we saw, was actually England versus Denmark in the Euros on the 11th of July with 29.85 million. And then the last of that big bump was the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II on the 19th of September 2022 with 26.2 million. So in looking at this graph, we can see that there's been a sort of a gentle decline over time, and gentle decline doesn't look too bad. But I'm kind of cheating with this chart because the chart is showing you millions of people, absolute numbers, but actually, I'm just checking my slides are doing the right thing. I've got confused about the order of my slides. So I've got one more question for you, which is what category of events over the last 60 years do you think has made up the most number of those big major sport? So if we analyze all of those events, sport is actually a lesser number. It's actually soap operas at 21%. Obviously, you can allocate events in different ways, and soaps make up 21%. I think someone was shouting out earlier when we talked about it is some big comedy events, Only Halls and Forces and stuff like that, which have featured over it. Of those soaps, and I'm not going to plague you any more, of those soaps, which soap do you think actually has had the most number in that time? So the Coronation Street, the Northerners win this time because Coronation Street, if I remember correctly, because I'm quite remembering numbers, is there are 8 times that Coronation Street has been the most watched programme of the year, whereas EastEnders has only made it 4 times. And EastEnders has only made it at Christmas or straight after in the New Year period. Coronation Street has done it in November, it's done it in March, it's done it in February, it's done it in January. So Coronation Street has, a particular story of that year has made it to the number 1 spot. Right, now I remember where all my slides are. The last thing I was pointing out is that I cheated a bit because this is showing you millions. Actually, a more interesting chart is to make this against percentage of the population. And our population has moved from 53 million, or 53.6 million at that end, all the way up to 67.5 million at this end. So if I take those numbers and I modify them by the population each year, we can see a much greater decline in terms of the popularity of those events. And suddenly, 1966 World Cup suddenly stands out as being a much bigger event than the Euro final back here in 21, I mean. So, what's causing all of that? And, general news, but just give it a kind of historical context to this. A lot of this is driven by fragmentation. And we're a reasonably older audience. I hope you've got a few younger audience members on YouTube. Is that actually when we started this chart, there are only 2 TV channels. So if you weren't getting 50% of the audience, you weren't getting something right. So basically BBC and ITV competing against each other. Then what we have is in the 21st of April 1964, we had our 3rd channel with BBC Two emerge. But then it wasn't until 1982 that number went up when Channel 4 launched on the 2nd of November. Now, at this point, we start getting cable TV, which I wasn't able to research properly. But really, the next big event where the number of channels increased, which was when Sky launched on the 5th of February 1989 with 4 channels. So we doubled. We went from 4 to 8. Then later that year, we had BSB launch. They actually launched with 5 channels. One of those was time shared, so they could claim they had 6 channels. So pushing those numbers further up. And then, over time, those satellite services and cable up those numbers. So we didn't really see those numbers jump up in a big way until, we have just missing out Channel 5, which launched on the 30th of March 1997. And then Sky Digital launched on the 1st of October 1998, which is where we really start to see those numbers rise. And then on the 15th of November that year, we had On Digital launch. We end up with what I reckon is kind of around 350 official channels we have today. Some counts will put that up into the 400s, and certainly pushes it up well above that. We start counting all the fast channels we have today. So over this period of time, we've gone from 2 to 300 to 500 TV channels. So, time conclusions. So, I think the answer to that question that I posed originally, is it the end? Do we, are big TV events still a thing? And I would say yes, they are. That's an easy answer to make. TV is still an incredibly powerful medium for bringing very large audiences together. Are they as big as they used to be? Well, clearly not. But even with the mass fragmentation that we've seen, we can still see those audiences being brought together. Sometimes in our conversations, we tend to sort of always revert to sport as being the big driver of big events. But actually, as we've seen over those 60 years, sport isn't always been. It is a regular feature of driving events, but it's not the be-all and end-all. I think one interesting data point is that in 2015 and 2016, the biggest events were the Great British Bake Off final. And its audiences, which were around 15 million, were bigger than the football, the World Cup final the previous year in 2014. So, even things like British Bake Off can go, beat sport. We are moving to an all IP world. It's kind of a dangerous thing to say in this particular building, and as an ex-employee of Arqiva. But in sometime in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see that shift, and we need to make sure that we've got networks that are scaled to support these big events. But actually, what I would argue is the big events aren't actually going to be the problem in an all IP world. People involved in streaming media would know that if everyone's watching the same thing, it's actually easier to deliver that event than it is if they're watching 400 different channels. So maybe we shouldn't be so scared of those events, and we should try and look for where the real problems are. And my kind of parting thought is that if we look at those big events, they didn't actually cause any stress on our national infrastructure from a broadcasting point of view. The ability to broadcast the Royal Family documentary, Band Aid, Live Aid, the Queen's funeral via broadcast infrastructure, that didn't stretch that infrastructure at all. What was stretched by each of those events was our national grid, because they created a synchronization of behavior, which meant that everyone went and turned their kettles on at the same time. And the national grid actually had to be able to survive the ad breaks during those events. And what I tend to think of is our problem in the future is not delivering the big events, but it's actually delivering the personalized advertising that we're going to want to have during those personalized events. So that's my closing conclusion. If you're at all interested in my work, I can be reached at that email address. And if you want to know where I nicked all of my information from, basically I took a Wikipedia page. So if you want to disagree with any of the numbers, they're on that page. You can go argue with the authors of that page. I just took that data and then did some number crunching against it. So thank you very much.
Got time for one or two questions, if okay, right, just right there. Let me see if so. Somebody set out these chairs in a way that made it an obstacle course for me.
Thanks for your research. I had a question about your statistics. So you seem to say that a lot of non-live events like Bake Off or Royal Documentary or soaps often came first in a year. But have you made the statistic every year to see if you accumulate over live or non-live? Is it live still dominant every year?
So it's only in recent years.
You might see it here. No?
Yeah. So it's only in recent years where on demand has been a factor. Now, looking at these numbers, what you will find is that when I've taken it, they've taken barb data. That barb data is going to almost certainly be plus 7 days. And so you're looking at how many people actually watched that event in plus 7 days. So actually comparing 1966, where the only way of watching that football match was to watch it live, to watching the Queen's funeral, that funeral number is actually going to include some things that weren't actually watched at the same time. But if you actually go and look at the numbers, things like the Queen's funeral, the people watching it, even in 24 hours would be tiny compared to all the time. So and I think I haven't done the research, but I think if you do go over the last 10 years where on demand can be a factor, really it's going to be absolutely synchronous viewing that's going to have driven those numbers, and the on demand will be tiny. Even Bake Off or things like that.
If you add everything, live is still dominant, basically. Yeah. No? Wow, that's amazing.
No, and I think I was saying about big events big events, and I think this is a good point to make. Is that apart from the big event, which is why people become afraid of the big events, because that's when you get synchronous viewing, whereas outside of that, but we have. I mean, you look at my brain is not going to dig up the numbers out, but you look at things where with some big television series where that television series has become almost the biggest event of the year, that slowly viewing starts off with being on demand and it begins to siphon into live as that television series becomes more and more sort of zeitgeisty. But that's only going to happen for a couple of big events.
All that factor, sorry. So the Ofcom report, it's easily findable.
Shall we do that question there and then?
Thank you. Yes. Talk about big events and how that wouldn't be a problem for streaming, which I tend to take issue with particularly in relation to football, an experience that I had just the other day. When I was watching the game outside of a pub
with a sort of hastily set up screen, bunch of people sort of craning their necks to watching the game with great anticipation, when suddenly there's a big cheer behind us. It's like, what's going on? It's like 30-second delay before we actually see the goal happening on that screen. Now, as I understand it, basically streaming costs extra to be able to provide provision, if you like, lower latency to a mass audience, whereas broadcasting television doesn't. So in my book, that makes television better for a live sporting football event, particularly. An issue which I was actually trying to persuade the audience of, because we were also getting extremely flaky reception, but nobody seemed to know what a TV aerial was, let alone have one. And I would actually suggest that is the issue.
Obviously, once we're all in an all IP world, we'll all have the same latency, and so that won't matter. But I'm trying to think which is the first World Cup after Sky Digital launched, because that was very noticeable. Being Italian 90. So Italian, and that sounds about right. So Italian 90. I remember being in my street, and it was the first year where you could hear which houses had Sky and which houses didn't, because of the time delay of the satellite service. And I think actually it's better than it used to be. But in there, you'd hear it. If you were on a Sky home, you'd hear a cheer, and you go, "What's happened?" Right. Oh yeah, Ian's got to get a good answer.
Latency is an issue today, but this is because lots of streamers at the moment focus on consistency and stability, and they are adapting and looking at how to improve latency for low latency delivery, because they do need to hit the sweet spot for latency, and there's always going to be latency. The sweet spot's understood to be around 6 seconds, but that at the moment they're going for consistency, but they will get to it. At the moment, it is not necessarily just a cost issue. There's cost to everything. It's much more about that. They want to make sure it works all the way through to the consumer, and that includes on customers' wonky Wi-Fi.
Quick comment. Very quick comment. There's a report from a company called Phoenix who do latency delivery. Every year they do it. But in 2023, there was a provider that was really good, and in 2024, the provider was really good, just like everyone else, because everyone's okay with latency bad, just collectively bad, and obviously it saved them a load of money by not having to do super low latency.
The reason why they had good figures that year is because they delayed the broadcast to align with the stream.
Right. So, talking of latency. Matthew, thank you so much. Hey.
Worth the wait.
Worth the wait. And obviously we had Noor and John as well. Woo! Awesome. So we're going to have a little break for the summer. We will be back in early September, I think, for another Cloud Native Media. We might be here. We might be somewhere else. Ooh, we'll see. We'll see how this pans out. But I think thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, make a comment. What do you think about live broadcasting? Is this camera live, by the way? What do you think about live broadcasting? Make a comment. So press the bell for notifications. All that. Seriously, we need your likes and subscribes. So I think we can end live screen there. Thank you very much for joining. Good to see you. See you next month. Next time, I should say, because it'll be September. Thank you very much. Bye. Woo! Are we gone on that? Okay. So we're not allowed to show the game.